Okay, why don't we get started? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ichiro Lamb of Deja Bomb Games, and I am here with Jenna Hofstein, Becky Taylor, Dan Silvers, Eric Asmussen, and some handsome gentleman named Will Stallwood. And today we are going to be talking about early access and what that has done for all of us. So since we have 5 panel members, I am going to sort of call on you individually to answer a number of questions, and I'm going to ask you to keep it a little brief, although informative and sensual if possible. Why don't we start with this? Jenna, what is early access?
Early access is a program on Steam where you can put your game up for sale, even though it is still not technically done, still not technically available for full release. So it's kind of like a beta program, except people can pay for the game.
And what is the early access game you had up?
So I had the Counting Kingdom available. It is an educational game for kids where you use math to defend the kingdom against invading monsters.
All right, Will, same question. What did you have up there, and what did early access do for you?
Hello. Hey guys. So for us, we have Auditorium up there, and we're doing it kind of a private early access. It didn't really do much. It makes me sad.
What makes it private?
We're doing a private beta rather than doing the whole early access chain, mainly because we have a bunch of friends who've also done it, and really it hasn't worked out very well. Ours is following a Kickstarter, so we're trying to figure out how to piggyback the success.
Dan, so you called together this illustrious panel of panelists. Why early access? What's interesting to you about that?
Well, I think the most interesting thing to me is that it is a sort of still experimental business model. We don't quite know what the do's and don'ts are of it. It's very open to interpretation. Some people early access a game that's in beta. Some people early access their prototypes. There's really no rules about what state the game has to be in order to start charging for it, but at the very least, you get the game. And I think that's what excites me about it more than other crowdfunding sources, because, other crowdfunding, you can be like, eventually we'll make this game, 5 years down the line, and now we're sitting on your money, and the audience is just waiting for your game.
So describe your early access title, Children of Liberty, and tell the audience, if you would, how that's been going.
Children of Liberty is a kids' stealth game about Paul Revere's ride. We launched on early access on Patriots Day this year, and it has been going surprisingly well. It's kept the company alive, paid for some animations and some other features, and we're going on update number 9 now, and it is running smoother and better, and playing so much better than it's ever played before, mainly because of the community interaction, keeping track of what everybody is saying on Steam, getting bug reports, being able to put in analytics right into the game, so whenever somebody plays and finds a bug, it gets sent right to our emails pretty much. So we've been able to clean it up and get going, and yeah, it's been great.
Eric Asmussen of 82 Apps, you have Robot Roller Derby Disco Dodgeball. Say that 3 times fast.
Nope.
Okay, but you have that up on Steam. Can you tell us a little bit about the game and why early access has been good for you?
Sure. So I actually came to Steam from a mobile world, and my big problem with mobile is you're building this game and it's really hard to get it out and test it with people. And then you spend all this time building all these features that you think people are going to like, and then you launch it, and then you don't know. You have no data with all that. And so with early access, you can launch something, and ideally it's in a playable state, right? I mean, there's a lot of controversy around early access, which is kind of a really interesting aspect about it. But you want to put out something that's good, but then you can use all that feedback to change the game and decide, is this feature worth spending a month or 2 months on? Is it worth putting the money into it? And so that's kind of how I've seen early access. But there's definitely a stigma around it as well, which is, I don't know, it's kind of a thing you have to battle. Because some games kind of just launch and then either disappear, they don't communicate, and then you get like the whole internet mad at you, so you don't want that.
Becky, your experience with games, I think, is with teams slightly larger than we're seeing here. Can you tell us about that and your experience in early access?
Yeah, so my experience has been kind of completely different, where the last game I was working on, Toy Soldiers, we were a game that was published by Microsoft on Xbox, Xbox 360, and what the studio wanted to do was take it back from Microsoft and release it on PC with more features, an updated engine, everything like that. So we had the game, and pretty much what we did in early access was the process of transforming it to a PC game. So, adding PC controls, adding a new engine with better graphics, because it was a 6-year-old game. It came out kind of at the beginning of Xbox 360. So a lot of problems we had were people expecting the game to be 100% finished. It's just an easy port from Xbox to PC. No. So that was a lot of the issues we were getting, where people were buying the game, even though we said in it, this is what we're working on, you're going to experience some bugs, some levels don't work yet, and a lot of people expected the game to be working just like it was on the 360. So, however, at the same time, I still agree with these guys where when you get the game on Steam Early Access, it really allows you to use your customers' opinions to shape the game. So some of the things that we were planning on changing, like the UI for the game, people didn't like. They wanted the old version of it. They liked kind of the historic-y, retro version of the original UI for the game. And so we ended up cutting that out. And or adding more things, adding bigger bosses. They want it harder, they want more levels, and even adding in a map editor, things like that. So I still think it was definitely positive, even though we did have a lot of the internet hating on us.
Do you feel like that's a feature creep thing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So Jenna, your experience with early access was one in which I believe Counting Kingdom you put up when it was relatively close to completion.
Yep.
Why did you choose to do that rather than earlier, and how did that bear on in your experience?
Yeah, so my experience was a little bit different than everybody else's. The game was about 3/4 done, as you were saying, before we went on to early access. We launched on early access in early June and then launched the game in early August. So it was a very, very short process for us. Part of that was that I just wasn't ready to get on Steam prior to that. I didn't kind of have all the bits and pieces lined up technically to make that happen. The audience on Steam is also not exactly my target audience, so I was very worried about getting feedback from a group of people about how they wanted the game to be, who are not necessarily 6 to 8-year-old children, and then have that pull the game in the direction that just wasn't right for it. So that was a concern. The main benefit for me of early access was just finding my blind spots. So as a mostly one-person team, there were some issues with the game, some usability issues, as well as some bugs that I had just never even seen, and I probably would not have run into if it wasn't for early access. A really good example is in the game there are potions, and potions can be dragged and dropped onto monsters. As it turns out, in the first early access build, you could also drop potions onto anything with a collider. So you could drop them onto spells, the towers, the spell book. You could drag potions onto other potions. So that was a horrible, horrible bug. It looked like it would work. It would make this nice little gloop, gloop, gloop noise and a nice little particle effect. So it looked like it was doing something. And players were just so confused because they would do this and be like, I have no idea what just happened. So that bug in and of itself made early access worth it for me, because if I had launched with that, it would have been a disaster. So finding those blind spots, those major issues that I didn't know I had, was the reason I wanted to get it out there into the world.
Thank you. Mr. Stallwood, you're doing a closed early access. In fact, it is so closed that nobody on this panel is privy to Auditorium.
Yeah. So it's weird hearing about early access and talking about it, because a lot of this stuff I feel is just beta testing, and we do it all the time. And also, our very first game, Auditorium, was done, I guess, 6 years ago. And we did it online, and we iterated every week. We did A/B testing, so we actually showed one version of the game and another version of the game, and whichever one got played more was the one we kept building with. And then we took 8 months to build the game. So I guess sorry, you got to change the subject just because I'm curious for you guys what you think makes it different than typical beta testing. I mean, I know obviously there's revenue up front. Do you feel like the revenue up front is as good? A lot of the things that I hear and I feel is that when people put their game on early access, they're getting money for it, but then you have to do a launch, so you also have to have maybe content up front, but then your launch is not as strong. Or is it as strong? I guess these are questions I'm kind of curious about.
So I can kind of answer that. So I feel like it's similar, but it's different. Whereas with players who are beta testing the game, usually they get it for free during that time, and then they have to go purchase it. And so it's helpful because you kind of gain sales that way also. Whereas purchasing it up front, the problem is, and Steam even updated their FAQ on this, the game may never actually finish. And it could also be really bad. Like I think there's a few that Steam's taken offline because it's been like either lies about what they're doing or plans or what the game's gonna be, or that they just never update. And I mean, depending on how big or small your team is, it might take you a month or more to do one update. And when people are paying money, they're a lot more invested in it. That it's great because they're more invested in it, so people will record videos showing you bugs. I've had people like want to come to the studio and play test for us in the studio to show us bugs that we didn't understand. But then we had the people who are like, you haven't updated in a week. Where are you guys going? What are you doing? Like, and really concerned, even though we were still posting on the Steam thing, you know, what we're working on and things like that. So it's different in a sense that beta users can just drop off if they don't like the game. Whereas in early access, they purchase the game and they want it to be what they thought it was going to be.
So do you like it because it has accountability, or do you hate it because it has accountability?
It's kind of mixed because it's good for the players to think that, you know, the studios will be held accountable for their actions, and studios kind of are like, oh, I got money, so I need to make sure I make the fans happy and deliver them a product. But then there's always the bad people in the world on both sides, being players or developers that just are like, oh, never mind, I got busy with school, so I'm not going to do this anymore.
So let me ask a question tangential to that. Dan, you have been in alpha for a while, creating, recreating, rebuilding Children of Liberty. I mean, you must have gone through everything that Becky has been talking about here. You know, can you give us an example of like a best comment or a best experience and a worst experience you've had?
I mean, it kind of depends on the iteration of the game we're talking about. We've exploded it 5 or 6 times at this point. I think, you know, probably some of the best feedback we've gotten is people who kind of understand that we are limiting the content in early access until launch. And I think that goes back to what you were saying, Will, about like, well, if you give them everything in early access, then launch isn't going to be that exciting. But if you have something special, you know, for the actual launch of the game, you can market that and you can give them more and, you know, really give them their money's worth in the end. Then, of course, there are always people who are like, oh, I didn't realize the game was, you know, this early access compared to, you know, beta early access. And to alleviate that problem, we did integrate a graph on how our level development is going. We didn't quite expect to have to clean up 200 or 300 bugs in a, what is it now, 5-month period. So level development kind of took a back seat to that. So unfortunately, that graph hasn't been updated in a few months, but now level development is back at the top of our schedule. So that's going along well now, and we'll finally be able to change that graph around a bit. So really, it just comes down to, you know, be as transparent with your audience as you can be.
So Robot Roller Derby Disco Dodgeball, Eric's game, is a multiplayer game, which of course requires a bunch of people to be in there to be any fun at all. Can you talk to us a little bit about why early access might be helping you right now in that regard?
Sure. So I do feel that there's a couple of genres of games that work particularly well in early access, and one of those is kind of the sandbox emergent behavior kind of game, like you're seeing with, you know, Rust and DayZ and it's just like this, if you look at the top grossing, it's kind of all over the place. And there's a couple other multiplayer ones too. So Gang Beasts just came out and that's done really well. And I think in a way, like with the multiplayer, like there's gonna be a lot more bugs you need to test. But the other like pretty salient problem is the indie multiplayer curse, right? I mean, this is a problem that launched indie games have that issue where, you never get the critical mass of users. But it's kind of a good way to test traction and test different ways to get people into the game and playing it. So like running tournaments or giving players decals and stuff, like kind of building up loyalty. Allows you to kind of beta test the stickiness of your game. And with multiplayer, you can also kind of gauge the community and see what kinds of things are making them either angry with each other or angry at you. So you get a lot of pretty honest feedback. And but mainly there's also a lot of the bug testing is a pretty big part.
So I'll put this out here to the entire crew here. Again, tangentially to what Eric just said, what genres do you think work really well or really poorly with an early access model?
I think, as long as you plan it out, just about any genre of game can work in early access. I mean, if you're making a game and you feel like how you're going to treat your early access period and exactly what your audience is going to get, then you can put your game in early access. I think the games we've seen be most successful in early access so far have been stuff along the lines of sandboxy or dynamically generated games where there isn't necessarily like narrative behind it or any kind of real linearity that you have to worry about.
I feel like there is a problem though with narrative-based games, because if there's just one story you're telling and then you're playing the game in an unfinished state, you're going to get like half through the story and then just kind of stop, and a lot of people like don't want the story spoiled until the whole thing is done. Yeah. Whereas like if you're playing it and it's always different every time, that gives them a reason to come back like when it's finished, or like stay excited through the process, because sometimes it can be a long process to get through. So it's just a little tough when you have like more static content. I think that's a weakness of the model.
Yeah, I also feel like puzzle games don't work very well. So a lot of times we'll be making a puzzle game, we've made a bunch, and the problem will be you'll get to this point and you're at scope and you're building levels and maybe you have, 60 levels or something, and then you realize that your game dynamic is completely wrong. So you actually have to go back and change something that was literally the thing that you played with the first 5 minutes of the game. And the second you do that, everyone gets really, really, really upset. But the problem is the game's actually a lot better for it. But now you've kind of like, you've given people this thing and they expect it to be in this model. And then there's a lot of turbulence, I guess, as far as changing it around. And then you have to deal with, the transparency is one thing, but you also have to deal with a lot of hate sometimes and a lot of love, which I mean, it's a great thing to get a lot of feedback. It can also be really, detrimental to development because you're sitting there spending a lot of time communicating instead of a lot of time building. I mean, for us as a small team, I feel like we have 2 people. We have one person who's sitting there talking to people all day and one person who's building. So it ends up being really slow.
Yeah, and if I can kind of add or continue that, talking about, you get a lot of love for your game, but you can also get like a lot of hate and it being detrimental. The thing I found is like you are literally communicating with your players 24/7, or like have the need to 24/7, because there tends to be a lot of them. And it can get, if you don't have a thick skin, it can be really bad when someone's like, your game is crap, it's not finished, and you're like, well, it's an alpha state. But they just are like, why did I buy an unfinished game and not read?
Yeah, I feel like it's having that girlfriend who like you keep breaking up with and getting back together with all the time.
Yes.
And it's like
yes.
really bipolar and happy. You're like, I love you, I hate you. You're like throwing chairs and then you're
yes.
kissing.
It's sort of telling who on the audience is nodding and who's going, what the hell are you talking about?
Because it also, like every single patch or update that you do, like one update they might have loved something and then they were all saying, but you should change this. And then you go and do that. And then they're like, never mind, take it back. I don't like it. And they kind of rage quit on you sometimes.
We have another game that's also in early access. I don't know why I didn't even think about it, called Intake, mainly because I didn't actually realize it was in early access for quite a while. But the thing about it is when we have to change scoreboards, people get really pissed off because of the score chaser. But the thing is, once we change a game dynamic, no matter how small it is, the scoreboards are completely useless. So when people spend like thousands of hours getting really good at this arcade game, and we change a little thing that really changed incremental scores. They get really upset when their score gets wiped from the board. And we've tried doing the whole archiving the scoreboard thing, but the thing is, it just takes so much damn time, and there's no way to get back to it, so they're really kind of missing that glory. So, we kind of make like an infograph for them, but now we're making infographics instead of making a game. So it's kind of like, was that what we were supposed to be doing? I thought we were trying to make a game, but.
And to jump on something that Becky said earlier, players don't always necessarily know what they want, so they can be adamant that they want this particular feature. But as a designer, it's your job to figure out, why are they asking for that? What's the problem that they're seeing? Are they bored? Do they want more story? Do they want a different mode? Like, why are they asking for that particular thing? And so early access is really great at uncovering problems, but as with any playtesting, you have to be just wary of a lot of the solutions that are proposed. And some of them can be phenomenal and amazing and something that you never would have thought of, but it can be difficult dealing with people who are like, I want this thing in the game and I want it now. And you have to be like, sorry, maybe we'll see, I don't know.
So let me toss that out to everybody. I think that's a great point, right? Henry Ford automobile said if I polled everybody and asked them what they wanted, they would say, oh, I just want a faster horse. That's wrong. Do you have stories of that happening? People saying, man, if you only made this platformer into a 3D space shooter, this would be amazing.
So I kind of have an example of a game that was in beta for a year, not technically early access because it was an Xbox game. Now this was a free-to-play game, and so automatically you get this is pay to win, no matter how much you iterate on it. If you are buying something in the game that's like gear, then it's automatically pay to win, no matter how much you balance it. And a lot of players were like, oh, I want like what it would be is you opened up the menu and you'd have your inventory, and then the second half of the screen would be the store. And players didn't want the store there. They didn't want to see the store. And like, we understood that. You kind of don't want the store in your face. But as a developer and someone trying to eat dinner, you kind of need the store right there in their face. And like, because a lot of the time it would be the players who, like, we made sure that you could play the game 100% free. In the office, we tested it, you could play it 100% free. But the players not spending any money didn't want to see the store there. So it was kind of that, like, what do we do? Do we hide the store, make it a separate button? Like, how do we want to handle that? So it was definitely a tough call, and we ended up not changing it, but...
Pay per month to hide the store.
Exactly. Actually, that was what we talked about. We were like, why don't we add like a subscription model on the side where you subscribe for, each month for this much money, and you get this much free like gold to use in the store, and we'll hide the store, and you can have a separate button for the store. So different things like that we had talked about, but yeah.
Yeah. Other stories.
Level editors, whenever somebody asks you for a level editor, I'm always like, oh, cool, that's great. Whenever you make a level editor, no one uses the damn thing. It's fucking useless. I don't even know why we make them. We make them for ourselves, and then we kind of put them out there, and we're excited, but I feel like half the time, and you might have had this experience, somebody asked for a level editor, and what they really wanted, they wanted you to like move the box to the left on level 3. And they're like, oh man, I could totally move that box if they give me that level editor. And then they never moved the damn box anyway. So I feel like that's one of those things that kind of comes up a lot. Because we've had like really amazing level editors for all of our games, and we've just never released them. And we've been doing the beta thing with Auditorium, and we have a level editor in there now, and we have analytics in the game, and no one ever uses the damn thing. It's actually called Designer Preview. So the whole point is it's 3 levels, only 3 levels, and a crazy level designer, like insane. You can make the entire game like 3 times over this level editor. Not a single level made.
What I've noticed is there is, a lot of requests for people to integrate Steam Workshop into early access games. And, really with Steam Workshop, it's like if you aren't planning for it from the beginning, it's just going to be an afterthought. Like, your focus is going to be on the game. It's not going to necessarily be on user-generated content unless that's what you've planned from the start. Like, it's not something you can just slap in.
Well, we started from, well, that's, we started from that point.
Yeah.
Also, I don't feel like that's a really good, Steam Workshop kind of sucks. I don't know if you guys have used it, but like integrating with it's not really very great. The fact that you have to jump out of your game and like shift tab a window and then you can install it and then that goes into a library, then you have to pull that back in your game. The fact that it's not.
Can I actually counter you on that?
Sure.
Steam Workshop is amazing because you don't have to do any of that.
Yeah, you do.
No, you don't.
Well, oh, you mean because we don't have to build that?
Yeah, well, no. I think technically speaking, you never have to leave your game. You don't have to ship tab out of your game to use Steam Workshop.
You do though.
No, you don't.
You
I have two
definitely
games
do.
up on Steam that don't.
Really? We
Yeah.
don't. We have.
I will tell you how to do it. We should talk.
I think we used it. We used it maybe a couple years ago.
Yes.
Oh, maybe that
So
was
we used it. I think we integrated it like 3 years ago. So
Okay, there you go.
Probably a lot has changed. So I assume that was probably a thing they addressed.
All right.
Can I add something? Actually, kind of going along the lines of this, since now we're talking about Steam, or.
Oh, we're getting
not
to
the game.
juicy stuff.
I know, right? So
tell.
Steam itself is essentially early access in a way because, I mean, not that you're paying for it, but wow, I can't speak English. It is changing quite consistently and frequently. Like if you activate the ability to have beta Steam things come up, it literally updates 4 times a day. It is ridiculous. Like every 10 minutes, it's like, Steam needs to restart. And you're like, what?
Yeah, I can't play Counter-Strike at all anymore.
Yeah, no, it just pops. Ugh. But so anyways, the thing is with that, they're adding these new things such as early access. They are adding new things to the store. Something kind of down the pipeline is that they're redoing the entire store to have kind of customer-focused content. So everybody's store front page will be different towards what kind of games they play. And the reason being is that they're kind of turning into like the Android store where after Steam Greenlight, where everybody can put up a game. And
Wait, can you describe Greenlight?
so with Steam Greenlight, or is it Greenlit? Greenlight?
Greenlight.
Greenlight, okay, I totally know my stuff. It's essentially where you can put up kind of your prototype of your game and people can vote if they want it on Steam. As far as I know, they're kind of planning to get rid of that and just let anyone, but at the moment, it's kind of a popularity contest with whatever game has the most friends gets votes and then gets on Steam.
So I have a feeling that in a lot of ways, early access is done so that they really want you to work on your marketing and not your game. We have it, like Intake, for instance, was one of our games in there, and it was specifically put into early access because they didn't really feel like the game was up to snuff. You know, they didn't know if they could. Basically, Valve came to us and they're like, we don't really know if you guys can sell the game. And so one of the reasons it was put into early access was it was actually supposed to be just a release title, ended up going into early access, which is why I kind of forgot about it, because to me it's just like, oh, this is how I release my game, not I'm going to this new thing. And this was before early access was even a word,
Yeah.
but, which is one of those things. We launched the game, and when we went to go search it, we had to like type the name to search it, but it didn't show up anywhere. And then a couple weeks later, the word came out for early access, and then it had an early access badge, and we're like, oh, okay, I guess that's what we are. We actually never really followed up with it, but we do routine updates anyway, so it's just a typical thing we do, which is kind of like what you guys are talking
Yeah.
about. It's just how we make games. But I feel like in a lot of ways, when we were put in that category and we talked about it, a lot of these things were happening in the back end of Steam to kind of, like new ways to promote your game too. Like, hey, you have 5 minutes in this little shell bubble, let's see how you do. So I don't think early access is just like, hey, you're working on a game. I think if you're looking at it that way, you're definitely going the wrong way. I think it's also, you're working on a game, but you're really iterating on your marketing more than your development. I think that's one of the reasons why you have to spend so much time talking to people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that Valve is trying to do, is trying to say, hey, you guys are small indies, you're great at making games, but maybe not so good at marketing. And I think it's one of their ways of trying to help us do it, but at the same time, I'm necessarily not really good at marketing, so.
Well, so Jenna, you've actually gone through the entire process. So do you agree with Will? Do you disagree with him? In what way did that bear on Counting Kingdom?
Having a game on Steam is a market validation. Right now, as the marketplace opens up even wider, it gets a little bit more diluted, but still right now, if you have a game on Steam, that's pretty hot shit. Like, that's awesome. And so going into early access was a way was a real boost to our marketing. I don't know that we had too much time to iterate on our message, but it made it much easier to talk to journalists, talk to Let's Players, and it made it much easier to get them the game because you can just be like, here's a Steam key. We were in open alpha for a couple months through our website before jumping onto Steam Early Access. And even though we had a couple hundred alpha testers, we got a nice burst of new people when we went into Steam Early Access because it's just a different group of people.
When did you guys launch in early access? I'm just curious because
When or why?
Because I know when we launched, they have like the mini feature spots that they give to early access. They didn't have those when we launched. So when we launched in the Steam store, it wasn't like, hey, this huge marketing boost. It was literally like your game's in the catalog, but you have to search for it, and it's not even in a tag. It was before tags existed.
Huge, but it was a helpful enough boost. So we still had to do a lot of our own marketing. Steam at this point, there are so many games there that just having a game on Steam doesn't do a huge amount for you.
It's so now you can go to a press person and be like, hey, I've got this Steam key.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's the level of validation. It also made it much easier. This is kind of a weird hidden benefit that nobody ever talks about, but submitting your game to festivals and conferences and stuff, you can just give them a Steam key. And what's really nice is that that Steam key then carries over to all the updates you do. So if you have to submit in May and they don't check your game until August, you've been able to iterate on all sorts between now and then, whereas if you just send them a build, even though if they're playing it in August, they're playing that really, really old build. So that's, for me, one of the really big benefits that I feel like nobody ever really mentions.
Well, let me toss this out to you guys. How many people in the audience, show of hands, have played an early access game on Steam? Thank you. So a majority of people. How many people, keep your hands up, how many people have played a game on Steam at all? Water. All right, great. Roughly the same people, actually. So give yourselves a virtual round of applause. How many, you know what? I'm gonna go and ask the tough question for you guys, and you don't have to answer this. But if you do answer this, I'm gonna ask you even more personal questions. Was your game profitable during the early access period?
How are you defining profitable?
You define it for me.
Well, you said profitable, not successful. I would say for us, definitely not. While the game made money, it didn't make any amount of money that a typical launch of our game does. The game being an arcade game, additional content on top of the game is not really very valid in the first place. So our launch wasn't really very exciting. There wasn't much we could do to spice up that launch because other than making a brand new arcade game, there wasn't really new content to give. We did give new content, new power-ups, things like that, but they're not really very, there's not a lot of substance there. So for us, the launch didn't go as well as we expected. Early access was pretty much the money that we made from the game. That said, I wouldn't say it covered development costs.
Can I add something? So also, I think part of it depends how much Steam likes your game, because you cannot
That's
buy
a really
advertising.
big point.
Yeah, you can't buy advertising from Steam. I tried. I went to them. I was like, here, have all this money, and I want my game on the front page. And they were like, nope. You get 5 visibility rounds for free. And then if they like your game or if those visibility rounds do well, they'll give you more, where you can be kind of on the front banner, or when you go to a category, we'll have it at the top. But so if your account manager at Steam really likes your game, you'll get more visibility, which can help make it successful. So I've seen games like The Forest that kind of appeared out of nowhere. That's just the survival open world horror game. And they were very profitable, and mainly because Steam, their account manager, really, really liked their game. Besides, the game was good. The game was good. And the account manager really liked them, and Steam really wanted to push them. So they kind of got pushed until they were always top on that, top selling games. So, which then that gets more visibility, and it just kind of is a nice snowball effect of making money. However, on the other side, if you're a tiny indie studio, don't really know anyone at Steam, and even though they were a smaller indie studio, they're actually a branch off from a larger studio, so they kind of already had connections in the industry. Whereas if you're a smaller studio, you don't really know anyone at Steam, you don't have the money to go to conventions, or even understand how to contact Steam. or are not good at marketing, which if a lot of people, like you're either a programmer, you're an artist, or you're like marketing and PR. It kind of, if you don't have those skills, it gets very tough and it can be very challenging where you might make yourself a dinner with that money.
It's also very possible that our game wasn't that good. I will say that.
That too.
It's hard to know. I mean, you put it up on early access, and sometimes, you make bad games.
It's definitely, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, my game hasn't been profitable. Part of that, I think, is a genre mismatch. It's an educational game for kids on Steam, and that's like a very weird genre for that marketplace. So we're launching on iOS this fall, and I'm hoping.
Did you say
it'll
it
make-
has or hasn't been profitable?
Has not
Okay.
been profitable. But hopefully we'll make a much bigger splash on iOS.
Is anybody willing to share numbers?
$5,000.
$5,000 sales?
Yep.
Anybody else?
I can't.
Children of Liberty is about the same right now, but while not necessarily profitable at the moment, I'd call it successful and getting bigger every month. And we're a long way from done. And what it's really done for us in terms of the success is build up our community, and that community can. It's like in Wayne's World too. And they tell two friends, and then they tell two friends, and so on and so on. So the more people get the word out about the game, the better it's going to do. So, we've basically given ourselves the time to say, okay, let's make, a couple bucks here and there and just, plug away and make the best game we can.
Dodgeball's, I have lower standards, so I would say it's been successful and profitable. It's made about $60,000 since I launched in March, which, a lot of that can go right back into the game, and it creates that kind of sustainable situation. I would say a lot of that is attributed to YouTube. That's been kind of the only thing I've found to drive people to the game, and fortunately it's a really good match for YouTube because you can play it with other channels. It's kind of just lively and fun, and you can kind of riff off whatever's happening. So in terms of marketing, and you mentioned beta testing your marketing, it's been fantastic to see like what works, what doesn't, and what kind of outreach really resonates with people, what updates resonate with people. So it's been very helpful for me. I don't think I would, and then I can scale the game larger based on how it's done, right? Otherwise, I would just have launched it months ago.
So it's funny because we talk about profitability. So I have another friend, Greg, and he makes a game called CoinCrypt, which is pretty cool. And it's, procedural dungeon crawler. But the way he approaches early access is that he works on the game as long as people keep buying it. So I think he's been up for, I guess, about 3 months now. And he launched, and I think, you say lower standards, it's just him by himself. So if he makes 30 grand a year, he's just out of college. He's like super, super pumped. And I think he's doing better than that. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I do know that his whole idea of early access is, I'm just going to keep working on it as long as people give him money. So if he does an update and the update goes particularly well, he just keeps working on it. When he does an update and he doesn't see like a big amount of sales, like I see him and I hang out with him and I notice his development kind of wanes a little bit. Doesn't work on it quite so much. And they'll put another thing out there and he'll throw a Hail Mary out every once in a while. But that's kind of his idea of early access. And I know we all have different ideas on what we think it is. But
To give a sense of scale there, though, like there's games that made whatever I made in like 6 months, they made that their first week, or they made 10 times that their first week. Like games that have made tens of millions of dollars. I'm sure like Rust and DayZ are like mind-blowing amounts. So it's hard to like, and you feel like a jerk, but it's like, things are going well, it's sustainable. But on one hand, you're like, well, if Steam would just put me on the front page, it would be just a drop in the bucket compared to like what's out there. So
Yeah, there's
it's hard to manage expectations, I think.
I'm totally drawing the blank on the name of this game, but it was on early, I think it was like Rain City or something like that.
Risk of Rain?
I think that was the name of it. But they're two college students out of Bothell in Washington State. So they're just two guys at university. They got a friend to volunteer to do the network programming for the multiplayer part, paid him like $200 for the whole programming part. And they made about 60 grand in the first week.
Yeah.
And because they, when I was working for a studio out there, they actually came by and we were talking to them, and like, he just made mind-blowing amounts of money, bought himself a new car, bought his dad a new car, paid off his college loans, like, their programmer still only got $200, but the two guys who mainly designed it made off really, really well.
But these are all exceptions to the rule.
Exactly.
These are like the 1% of the 1%.
Absolutely.
And
it also
That
makes a
can't be your
difference how many
expectation.
games you have on Steam, like how you're doing. So for us, like we made around 60 or something our first week or something. We consider that a pretty bad failure. You know, we have a 5-person team that worked on the game for a year and a half. That doesn't really cover the salaries of 5 people. And even early access, so early access, to me, has nothing different, isn't like no different at all than launching a game. And I think that's because we've been launching games for 6 years and we've done them from a traditional marketing background where we do A/B testing and we iterate on the game, and we come from web development. So our games are built on the web, they're done with Flash, they're done with analytics, they get updated frequently, they get updated often. Auditorium, you bought a subscription fee and you went to the website, and we would change it and we would update it all the time. So for me, early access is just kind of like, it's just a different buzzword to launch a game, and Valve treats us a little bit differently, whether that's good or bad. So I think it's interesting hearing like the different scopes of the money and what they need. But yeah, there are exceptions that are insane, but I feel like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of the things that we're learning from early access were things that we should be doing in the first place.
Yes.
But finally, the tool sets are actually being put in a place, and I kind of feel the same way for you. I feel like Steam Early Access now for us is kind of a playground before we actually launch our game. We launch our games mostly on iOS, and that's where we make a lot of money, and we still make more money to this day through our Flash website than through Steam or any other portal. So.
Although you are very successful on iOS, right? I mean, they feature your games regularly.
I talk to people about this all the time. iOS is a little bit, it's a little bit nicer than Steam as far as the fact that if you're a small indie, there's a really good chance that they'll talk to you. And I think the reason is they get like 40,000 games a day or something, and most of them just really suck. And for them, selling games is really important because that's what sells their hardware. For Steam, and Valve, if they sell like the top 1% of the games, whether it's just their games, they're going to make a lot of money. So them selling your games is not really as important as them selling and catering to the big names, the id Software, the Bethesda, whatever. Whereas different platforms like Apple and Android, they specifically want to cater to those indie devs. So for us, it's been better, but we've had times where the games didn't do so well, and they're all pretty much directed based on how well you keep in contact with Apple and talk to them and hang out, which, if that's a thing you can do with Valve, you can get the feature spots. I don't know how you do that, but you can do it.
He'll show you the ways.
All right, so there seem to be multiple different factors of success on early access. You have the monetary aspect, you have the testing aspect, you have the PR aspect. Those are 3. What am I missing?
Well, I think the community groups is a part of all of that with the PR, but the one thing that I have liked for early access over our traditional model of like the web stuff is, first off, the tools are there, which is cool. They're all in one place, but we normally have to set up your own forum and everything and regulate it and talk to people, and then you have to like ban people for being jerks and the thumbs up and the thumbs down. But that's all kind of built in with the groups for Steam, which I found to be really awesome.
Yeah, the community aspect on Steam has been really good and a really important part of it because they share with their friends.
The weird part, though, is seeing the split between the early access community and the Greenlight community. Completely different people. The Greenlight community is vile, full of vitriol, just absolutely terrible monsters, versus the early access community is just like bunch of wonderful people,
You might get a couple bad eggs, but they're majority.
Dan, do you have green light stories you want to share?
Now that the game is actually on Steam and has been for a while, I'm probably safe to talk about our Greenlight era. There have been instances where like a game would start on Greenlight and then like a publisher would come in, or they want to switch over to early access and like Valve won't let them because they're already on Greenlight. But Basically, when we were on Greenlight, the game was in a even much earlier state than what we launched on early access, and really, what it was just absolutely terrible. We got maybe 40 votes up in total, and just a lot of hate being thrown at us. People being like, "Oh, this looks like a Flash game," and just like really.
Flash games are really cool.
Flash games are really cool.
Though I think you were also, it was around the time when Greenlight kind of still was first starting. There weren't a lot of Flash games on Steam.
Yeah, we were one of the first games up on Greenlight,
Yeah,
actually.
so there
You
was
were
still.
you were there before you could download games, right? Which I think is huge. Like what the hell? Like, how do you judge a game if you can't actually play it?
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. It was a mess, but luckily we hadn't spent any money on it. So, because like I said, we were like the 10th or 11th game up on Greenlight. So, yeah, we after a couple months, we just took it down and said, when another opportunity comes around, we'll go for that. And then an opportunity came around, and it's been a much better experience.
All right, so we have about 5 minutes left. Is there anybody out in the audience who would like to ask our illustrious panel members a question? Are the mics live?
Yeah, there's mics on each
Let's go,
side.
yes.
Hey, so my wife and I actually have a game on Steam Early Access, and it's called Imagine Me. From our experience, we don't think, from my opinion, I should say, I don't think that I would do early access again. And I guess I want to ask you guys, would you do early access again?
I definitely would. Actually. Yeah.
I would if we bring a game to Valve and they told us we have to do early access to launch it.
Yeah.
I think if we're backed into a wall, I'd much rather do early access and be on Steam than not be on Steam. But I think it's our preferred route to do our beta testing and community development on our own. My only problem with community development stuff is that it's cool, but at the end of the day, those customers are Valve's customers and not your customers. Doing it traditionally through websites with A/B testing and mailing lists, that's your mailing list. It's how Bethesda makes all its money. It's how all of the big name publishers make their money. Not controlling your marketplace is kind of a problem.
I would definitely do early access again. It helped me find a lot of bugs I never would have seen, and it helped me get the momentum ball rolling just with PR, so that was great. I'm not sure whether I'll do Steam again. As a kid's educational game, it's just a weird fit, and so I'm not sure with the next game whether I'll be publishing on that platform.
All right, another question.
What lessons have you learned from other people's early access projects, the do's, the don'ts, that you'd be willing to share with everyone else?
Make it very, 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 very clear that the game is not done. People don't read. People do not read.
Yeah, like what Dan was saying about transparency.
Yeah.
Communicate all the time. And if you just drop off the radar for a month, you're going to have if you just tell people every week, like, yeah, it's going to take longer, I'm working on these things, this is why it's delayed, they'll be like, that's fine. But if you just disappear, they're going to hate you.
Every single day talk.
Yeah, if you don't talk to your girlfriend for a month, she'll be real pissed.
Don't overpromise.
And then for the game itself, have any kind of consistent update schedule, whether it's once a week, once a month, once every 2 months, if you have to do that. Have some consistency to when you update, and some consistency to, when you communicate to your people, whether it's, one thing you should definitely do is take advantage of those Steam announcements, because having a little pop-up in the corner of somebody's screen works a lot better than putting out a tweet that says, hey, we're alive, check out our most recent blog post. Nobody's going to see that, but they will see a pop-up.
And jumping on the idea of consistent updates, I kind of went into it with this notion that I should only update with every major feature I add into the game. And it turned out I very quickly switched to a weekly update schedule, even if it was just fixing a couple bugs, a little bit of visibility polish. Having that regular schedule instead of these big milestones really helped keep things going.
And I think we have time for one more question.
Okay. So, as someone who has put money into early access games, Project Zomboid, The Forest, to name a few, I think part of this mixed blessing of the enthusiasm of fans, how do you combat people getting their fill of the game before you actually put out the big content? When I use Project Zomboid as an example, I played that game a lot on early access, but I'm kind of done with it, and I know that it's not finished. Do you decide to hold back content and wait until it's completely released to sort of give it to the players? Or do you, like, sort of drip feed it to them?
One question, before we answer, I do have a question for you. Do you feel like you got your money's worth?
It's a little bit of a hard question to ask. Yes, I do, because my overall goal this is just a personal goal, but whenever I put money towards a Kickstarter and early access, I want to help the developer more than actual play a game. If I could, I probably would have Kickstarted Project Zomboid rather than get an early access, and I probably would have preferred that. So for me, I feel it was worth it, but content-wise, I feel that I may have paid a little too much for the content that I got. Because with early access, I feel that you are releasing the game to them. You're not giving them a demo, you're giving them the game. So from a purely mechanical standpoint, I feel like I probably overspent.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely mindful of that. Like I have to, if I see like the player numbers drop, because you can see that all the time, like, okay, well maybe I need to like push out this big feature, and like you're maybe pushing against scope creep at that point. It's definitely a challenge. It's something you have to worry about. But I don't really have a strategy in terms of, I'm going to save this like really awesome thing for later.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't do that, and I think that was like a huge failure. So I feel your pain.
Like you're saying you wished you had had one giant.
I wish we had more content. We have these friends, Final Form Games, they're from Philly too, and we talk about, we're in private beta right now with Auditorium, and we're really talking about, do we want to do early access again? Because it's so similar to this model that we first started with A/B testing. But that's kind of the problem, right? How do you save up all this content, but also at the same time you want to give like an experience that's vast and cool enough that if you're a first-time adopter, you're still going to have fun and you feel like you got your fill.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, let me do it this way. Any last thoughts? We are being shooed out of here shortly.
Support early access games.
We need money.
We are very poor.
Thank you for coming to our panel.
Yes.
Right. All right. Well,
Thank you guys for coming.
again for coming to our panel, and thank Jenna, Becky, Dan, Eric, and Will. Round of applause for them, please.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.